Good afternoon. Mortgage holders are breathing a sigh of relief with the Reserve Bank deciding to keep interest rates on hold for the first time this year. Live to our political reporter, Jasmine Turling's in Canberra. Hi, Jazz. The RBA hasn't ruled out further hikes if required.
Yes, good afternoon. And this was a unanimous decision by the Reserve Bank Board, and one that most economists were forecasting, though still welcome news. After 3 consecutive rate rises this year, the cash rate remains steady at 4.35%. Now, that's despite the latest data showing that both headline and underlying inflation are still stubbornly high. There are signs that growth in consumer spending is slowing, though, with the board pointing to property prices falling in some capital cities. But what happens from here really hinges on what comes from Trump's peace deal with Iran on Friday. The RBA says oil prices have eased in recent weeks, although energy and most related commodity prices remain higher than they were prior to the Middle East conflict.
We still have to make sure that that inflation problem we had prior to the conflict, that is addressed, and that's really what the recent tightening's been about.
The end of this war can't come soon enough. Australians have already paid a really hefty price for this conflict.
Now, 3 of the 4 major banks have now updated their forecast, tipping we have reached the peak of this cycle, with interest rates to fall in 2027. Westpac is the only outlier, forecasting another 1 to 2 rate rises before the end of this year.
That's not on the back of domestic pressures, it's on the back of what we're seeing in terms of imported inflation. So we're still expecting, even with the tourists, we're still expecting oil prices to remain elevated to the end of 2027.
Now, on that, the federal government is monitoring the developments in the Middle East on whether it decides to end or extend the current fuel excise relief. The tax cut, which includes the heavy road user vehicle charge, is due to expire at the end of the month. Anne.
Jasmine Turling's in Canberra. Thank you very much. Former soldier Ben Robert-Smith has been back in a Sydney court attempting to have his bail conditions altered after being charged with war crimes. The Victoria Cross recipient wants to relocate from the Gold Coast to Brisbane to be closer to his children. He's also seeking exemptions to attend military functions. Nick Overall has more.
Well, a surprise appearance from the former SAS soldier this morning, arriving with his legal team to seek changes to his strict bail conditions. The court heard he is hoping to attend 2 ceremonies and a social event next week. Now, it comes around 2 months after he was granted bail while awaiting trial over the alleged war crime charges. At the time it was imposed, he could only leave Queensland to travel to Sydney and to Perth for legal reasons. The 47-year-old spoke briefly outside court this morning. Here's what he had to say.
Today is just about being able to see my children and moving back to where we actually live.
Now, the hearing has been adjourned until later this afternoon. It is understood that prosecutors will not oppose him seeking changes to his bail that will allow him to attend some of the events, and we'll bring you all the developments in the news at 6 tonight.
US President Donald Trump is back on the world stage, touting his deal to end the war with Iran. Our Europe correspondent Isabel Mullen is in Evian in the French Alps, where the G7 is taking place. Hi, Izzy. Trump's peace plan has dominated discussion there.
It certainly has, Anne. Good afternoon. But it's the US Vice President J.D. Vance who shed a little bit of light on what this deal might look like, telling reporters in the US that it's about a page and a half and, quote, very general, which just means that the details of this major deal, they'll be worked out a bit later. What we do know is that the Strait of Hormuz, at least according to the Trump administration, is partially reopened, and it will fully reopen by the end of the week. Both Sir Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, and Emmanuel Macron, the French president, committing to send defence personnel to the strait to help reopen it. So really bowing to Donald Trump's pressure. Donald Trump sitting down with Emmanuel Macron first up at this G7 leaders meeting. Both leaders looking visibly relieved and both hopeful that oil prices will come down.
Very importantly, the oil is plummeting down and the stock market is shooting up like a rocket. I think it's going to be free sailing. We do want to see if we can straighten out the Lebanon thing. because it just seems to just never end.
The IAEA and the United States are going to help Iran destroy the highly enriched stockpile.
Now, the sticking point will be whether Israel complies with Donald Trump's demands and stops striking Beirut. We've already seen Benjamin Netanyahu saying that he'll keep troops on the ground there in southern Lebanon. Donald Trump is meeting with Middle East leaders today. They're not officially part of the G7, but they have been invited here by the French president. So we'll see Donald Trump talk to leaders from Qatar, the UAE and Egypt. That deal, which extends the ceasefire for 60 days, will be signed over in Switzerland on Friday. Anne.
All right, Izzy, thank you very much. Isabel Mullen reporting from France. A beauty business in Concord West has been targeted by an attempted firebombing. Several improvised devices were detonated outside Beauty Lab on Concord Road at around 11 o'clock last night, triggering small explosions and leaving a trail of shrapnel behind. The business only suffered minor damage, with police unsure if it was the intended target. The mental health of a teenage killer is being examined as an inquest begins into the death of 10-year-old Biddy Porter. In the months before the killing, the teenager exhibited bizarre behaviour, but the warning signs were ignored. Leonie Ryan reports.
Good afternoon. Well, this inquest comes 6 years after Bridgette Porter, affectionately known as Biddy, was killed by a teenage girl at a rural property following a campaign by her parents. Family and friends are here, and unsurprisingly, Biddy's parents, Rebecca and Dominic, have needed their support because at times the openings made by council assisting the coroner had to be paused because it became too overwhelming and they had to walk out.
I'm quite overwhelmed, to be honest. Very symptomatic with my PTSD and in quite a lot of pain, but struggling with the process.
Biddy was only 10 years old when she was stabbed multiple times by a 14-year-old girl at a home at Gunnedah. The details so horrific the media has been banned from reporting on it. It's hoped this inquest will shed some light on the mental decline of the offender, and some disturbing behaviour has emerged. This inquest heard the girl started stapling her hands at the age of 10, was burning her skin and had a fascination with knives. At the age of 13, she killed 6 chickens and put them in a fire pit. She filmed it and showed it to her classmates. A teacher reported seeing her pulling out body parts of the chicken out of her school bag. The police officer who took part in her arrest has given evidence saying he was blindsided by the Director of Public Prosecutions when it was decided not to go to trial. Instead, they accepted offence proven but found the girl not criminally responsible due to mental illness.
I just don't believe justice has been served in this case and ever will be.
Now, this inquest will run all week, with evidence expected to be given by the offender's mother and father.